remote and still, hinted higher worlds unseen, so may our lives be soaring and serene. Mother, we thank you, your joy shines in everything. Open these channels that the world once more may sing. Rivers seek passage unhindered by rock or tree, so may our lives flow steadfast toward the sea. Mother, we thank you, your joy shines in everything. Open these channels that the world once more may sing. Mother, we thank you, your joy shines in everything. Open these channels that the world once more may sing.
My name is Ananta, and that's Maria. That's Nikula, that's Nishala, and we're just glad you're here. I'd like to read from The Secret of Right Action, which is from Rays of the One Light by Swami Kriyananda. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. One of the most famous stories in the Gospels is that of Martha and Mary. Jesus, visiting the home of Martha, was teaching while her sister Mary sat at his feet, absorbing his divine love and wisdom. Martha, meanwhile, busied herself with serving her guests and was upset with Mary for not helping her. "Lord," she cried, "doesn't it matter to you that my sister has left me to do all this serving alone? Please ask her to help me." "Martha, Martha," Jesus answered, "thou art careful and troubled about many things, but one thing is needful, and Mary hath chosen that good part which shall not be taken away from her." This story is classic, for Martha's complaint is very understandable and not, on the surface of it, spiritually wrong. Jesus may well have told Mary to get up and help her. We don't really know that he didn't, considerate as he always was of others' needs, but the teaching here doesn't concern the obvious dilemma of devotees to work for God or to spend all one's time in prayer. It concerns rather the attitude of the mind. Jesus didn't tell Martha, "Martha, you're doing too much." He told her rather, "You are letting your work affect your inner peace." That was the contrast. Not work versus contemplation, but restless preoccupation versus peaceful absorption under all circumstances. As it says in the Bhagavad Gita, the 2nd chapter, actions performed under the influence of desire are greatly inferior to those which are guided by wisdom. Happiness eludes people when they act from self-interest. Seek shelter, therefore, in the equanimity of wisdom. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om,
Usually we read from Yogananda's Whispers from Eternity, but as today is Mother's Day, I wanted to read one of his prayers, poems that's not in that book, and it's by Yogananda. It's entitled Mother's Day. O mothers of every clime and age, you are glorious gates of service and mercy unconditional, through which the Divine Mother has entered and offered grace and protection to all earth's children. From the scorching sun rays of wants, shelter and surcease are found in the shade of the mother's tender help. When the world has no use for the erring one, and forgiveness is coldly withheld, the mother still has only love and amnesty for her transgressive son. So to my mother and to every woman my mothers all, I do bow, for in them I behold the Divine Mother incarnate. With every devoted son of the earth, who plucks a flower and offers it in love to the mother who gave him birth, I join with my love and give that blossom to my mother divine. For 'tis she who abides in every motherly form, sent to earth's sad vale to make it joyous sweet, by their sacred representation of the all-nurturing divine presence. In my mother's voice I hear a subtle soul-awakening call of the mother behind my mother. In my mother's willing forgiveness, I find the compassionate pardon of the cosmic mother. In my mother's selfless tending, the divine ministering. In my mother's caressing love, the boundless love of the mother of all. So happy Mother's Day, everybody. All of you, as Ananta said, who are mothers of children, but also all of you as instruments of the Divine Mother. One of my earliest memories, childhood memories, is in nursery school and making gifts for for our mothers and our divine mothers. Didn't call it that by that name at that time. And we put together, as many of you have probably done, a little terracotta pot and put soil in it with really bright colored succulents and marigold flowers, and these we all carried home to our mothers. But it's something that stands out very vividly in my mind. Mother's Day was a very big deal throughout my life and upbringing. And when we look at Divine Mother, for us, there is the honoring of mothers. There's the honoring of, as well, being spiritual beings, that Divine Mother. And it was interesting for me. I was reading the history of Mother's Day. I kind of had forgotten it, so bear with me. But it was interesting because in this country, it's celebrated in many countries throughout the world. Isn't that nice to know? It's certainly a worthy holiday of celebration. But in this country, it started pretty much on the heels of the Civil War. And there was a woman, Julia Ward Howe, and she was an activist of the time. She was a writer and a poet, and she was catapulted into fame. She wrote fame. She wrote the Flame of Fame. And she wrote the Battle Hymn of the Republic. And but she was very disenchanted and very hurt by the carnage, as many were, of the Civil War. And so she dedicated her life to drawing together women nationwide and worldwide to come together to set forth this day. And she started it with a proclamation of peace, and that this holiday would unite women in a mission of peace, of world peace, and bringing peace again into the consciousness and into the daily dynamic of human lives. And it took off for a little while, and then it faded, and it wasn't until the early part of the last century that another woman, Anna Jarvis, put forth again the effort to instill this as a national holiday in this country. Her mother, it had been her mother's own wish to set aside a day for Mother's Day to honor all mothers, but she died with that wish unfulfilled, and it was her daughter who put forth the energy to get that momentum going until it was declared a national holiday. But I thought it interesting that it had its foundations in peace, certainly a divine quality and a motherly quality, a quality of Divine Mother. I first heard of this concept when I read Autobiography of a Yogi, and that's probably true for many of you, at least if you weren't raised in the Catholic Church and didn't have Mary there as an image of Divine Mother, the expanded mother. But when I read Autobiography, and when we read in that chapter of Yogananda's life and his meeting and his divine friendship with Master Mahashai, a great saint, and Yogananda used to go to visit him And one day when he went there to visit, Master Mahashai held him at bay and said, wait, don't bother me. I'm talking to Divine Mother. Well, this put Yogananda, the little Mukunda, over the edge, because he just couldn't stand the thought that this dialogue, this communion was going on in such proximity to him, but he wasn't a part of it. He couldn't hear it. And he didn't wait, and he started to go after Master Mahashai and pester him, and please, you know the Divine Mother, you have her ear, please intercede for me. I must know that she loves me. I have to know. I can't go on with my life without knowing. And he was throwing somewhat of a tantrum and wouldn't relent until Master Mahashai said, okay, I'll talk to her. And Yogananda went home, and the minute he got home, he went up to his attic meditation room and started to meditate. And some time went by, and then indeed, Divine Mother appeared to him. And you all know the words she said to him, always have I loved you, ever shall I love you. And he went back to Master Mahashai the next morning as early as possible, and he, in his mischievousness, pretended that nothing had happened and started to bother again Master Mahashai. What did she say? What did she say? Did you talk to Divine Mother? Did you find out if she loves me? Does she love me? And on he went, and Master Mahashai said, mischievous little sir. And he just wouldn't say anything, and finally said, must I bring this in to, must I speak the words that you received, the blessing and the grace that you received last night when she visited you? And so, you read that story and so many like that. To the young Mukunda, Kali was the image, like the chant that we sang this morning. But it could be one of so many names, so many images. It could be the Divine Mother beyond the form. But that was reality for him. And he was able to expand on that relationship with his own mother. And this is important to note too, because being in on this physical plane, being in this world, all relationships we know aren't perfect, but it doesn't diminish the Divine Mother. It doesn't diminish those divine qualities that come to a focus when we honor a day like this and try to take it a step or two further. What is really happening here? What is that consciousness? And wherein does that consciousness reside within my own being? How can I deepen that consciousness? Yogananda, he so exuded that vibration. To me, they're synonymous. Divine Mother is Yogananda, Yogananda is Divine Mother. It's the image that I always picture. There's no man there's no male, there's no female. It's just that energy. He was one time, his long hair, his robes, a man came up to him and said, "Is you a man or a woman?" And Yogananda said, "What do you think?" But he was just so beyond these bodily temples that we reside in. He was the consciousness. He was the quality of Divine Mother. He was kindness supreme. He was gentleness. He was consideration of all others' realities, whatever they might be. He was able to, through that love, be in their person and understand where they were coming from, understand their consciousness, and speak to that consciousness, whether outwardly or inwardly. And his vibration, his love, could be felt in that way. I remember one time when I was at home, it was during college, and I must have been a break or something between semesters, terms. And I had some kind of flu, cold bug, and I was very, very sick. And just one of those times when you're feeling so crummy you can't even sleep. And so I was laying there in my bed, and my mother just very gently knocked at the door and opened it up. Said, "How are you doing?" And I just, I could hardly say anything. And she said, "I wish I could be there in your stead." And that, probably more than anything, spurred me to get well, because I didn't want my mother to have to feel bad on my account. But that is the nature of Mother. That is the nature of Divine Mother. That total awareness of our every need, our every aspect, the good and the bad, the ridiculous, the imperfections, all of that. And then with that knowledge, with that knowing, responding accordingly. This reading today is so perfect for Mother's Day when we talk about right action, because it's easy to think that right action is the job perfected, the job well done, the job completed, whatever it is, some personal success, something that we've accomplished, something that we've done personally. But it's so much more than that. It's an attitude of being. It's that step beyond doing, that step within doing that becomes being in God. And that's what Jesus was addressing in Martha. That's what he wanted her to note, that quality in Mary that could do, but be in consciousness of Divine Mother, be in consciousness of God, be in consciousness of her guru while doing. And that's really what celebrating Divine Mother is about, strengthening that consciousness within us and trying to feel and instill those qualities in this life we live until the point when we get it right. And getting it right and right action are doing it with Divine Mother. I was reading recently a letter that Swamiji wrote to the disciples when he had just come. He was in charge of the monks at Mount Washington. It's a very, very simple and deep letter and message, and it's all about right action. And he talks about himself, and because all we can do is speak from our own experience. And he was a very strong-minded, intellectual individual, tremendous amount of energy in life before the path and after the path, always doing, always creating, always his attention partly out there on the next thing. And he saw that in himself in the ashram. And he could see that, there he was, and he was dedicated to the spiritual path. It's never like he looked to the left or the right or thought of doing anything else. But he found that he was always busy thinking about the next thing, even thinking about the next way to serve Master, thinking about how to serve Master better, which is a great thing and a noble thing. But even to that extent, it took him out of just being in God and having all his attention on God. Because to the extent that we're sitting there at the Guru's feet, like Mary, and thinking of something else, that's 1, 2, 10, 20 thoughts that aren't about God. And that's the point. We're in this incarnation, we're in this life until we get it right. And getting it right means being in God. Once we can hold on to that, there's no reason to be here anymore. But it's just living this life and learning that. A beautiful letter. And he said in all his time there with Yogananda never complimented him on, wow, you did this really well, or what a great job, or you're brilliant, or, we could have never done this without you. He never brought it to that level. But Kriyananda said what he did say, and when he did comment, it was always about his devotion. He was always, Yogananda would thank Kriyananda, would acknowledge that he did something in the consciousness of devotion, that he expressed devotion. And Swamiji says that's what was important to Yogananda. That is what is important in our lives. That's the place that ultimately we need to come to in our daily life, in the midst of heightened activity, the awareness and the knowing that it's all about God, and it's all for God, and it's all because of God. And so I was, a couple of weeks ago when we had our Easter celebration here, I was seated up here. Usually I'm not up in the front, but I was seated there right across from Swamiji. And it was a brief meditation. Remember, he had us there meditating together. And the thought came to me, we have no idea what we're receiving. Even if we're amidst great souls in great environments on pilgrimage, we really have no way of knowing. We might feel energy, we might feel some bliss, we might feel some joy, but we don't know the scope of it. we don't know the specific ways in which our karma is being just burnt up in that moment, or how much longer there is. On that level, we don't really know. You can be, I'm sure many of you have been on a place in pilgrimage, and a very holy place, just sanctified with spiritual vibration, and felt nothing. Isn't that the oddest thing? But something is happening. Just these holy vibrations are flooding you, and yet you feel nothing. But what we do know is the movement of energy as love through our hearts. That's what we know, and that's what I felt in that moment. We know blessing is coming, but what we can really know from experience is that love that flows through our heart. And that's what it's about, and that's what this life is about. And it doesn't matter what's gone before. It doesn't matter that we haven't perfected it yet. It's just being willing in this moment to do it again, try again, feel a little more love in the situation that isn't quite bringing it out, but to try and get that energy going, get that energy moving. Disciples of Anandamayi Ma shared with Swamiji and through Swamiji, all of us, this attitude of devotion, this quality of love and its depth that we must claim for our own. And they told Swamiji words that Anandamayi Ma said of him. And what she said was, here is this lotus in this pond, and there are many frogs that have come up beneath it, around it. They're all croaking and making the sounds that frogs make. But then comes this bee, this single bee, and goes right to that lotus and drinks the nectar. And she said, Kriyananda is that bee. And even more interesting, she said, people have been with this body for a long time. Devotees just right at her side, 20 years, 25 years at that point. And she said, none have drawn as he has. So we have in him a beautiful example of what Divine Mother means to us in terms of consciousness, and what we ourselves need to cultivate to come into that. And to make Divine Mother close, Yogananda said, Mother is closer than the Father. And it doesn't take a lot to figure that out when we've done something wrong. Even to this day, it's always the person who's going to support us that we want to go to, right? And that's always the one who has those Divine Mother qualities, the one who can give discipline and guide, but the one who's also going to be supportive and listen, especially when we've really bungled and done it wrong yet again. We seek that comfort. It's close to us. And so when we hold God as yet a concept, as Divine Mother, it's that energy and consciousness and support that we're trying to tune into, not to be patted on the back merely, but to guide us and to inspire us and to take us forward from that moment. And when we can develop that kind of love, that Divine Mother love in our hearts, that's when Yogananda says we can love all the world, because then it's unconditional. At this point, it's I love this person, I love this person, I love that person, but I can't love this other person. I can't love yet this other child. I can't yet love all children. I can't yet love all beings. But as we develop that consciousness of Divine Mother within us, then that love can expand. And in that's wherein unity is born. That's wherein harmony is born. And that's wherein we will realize it on this planet. Not that we're here to make it perfect, but it is for us to do while we're here. And I'd like to just close with, as I was meditating this morning, the words of a chant came to me. Will that day come to me, Ma? And it closes with the words, blind eyes see the Ma hiding everywhere. It's really a beautiful, beautiful phrase. Because when we are blind to worldliness, when we are blind to duality, in other words, centered in the consciousness of Divine Mother, that's when we see her everywhere. That's when we see her in everyone. Thank you all, Divine Mothers.
Mother of wisdom, receive